Hello, my name is Phil. I am the rector of the Draycott and Lem Valley Benefice, and this is something a little bit different for a Sunday morning. I'm not doing an expository preach like I normally do because the summer. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about something that actually God's been challenging in my life and showing me in my life, and a little challenge He's given me that actually has been really quite helpful for me over the last couple of weeks, and maybe might be helpful for you as well. So let's see how we go with this. As you can see, I'm unscripted, so that'll end well. So I want to start by taking you back a few weeks. You see, as a vicar, we take steps to try and make sure that we have some tools in place to help us stay close to God. And one of the ones that I find really useful is I have what we call a spiritual director. My spiritual director is a guy named David, and basically every 6 or 7 weeks or so, I go and see him. I sit in his lounge and I chat to him and just tell him whatever's in my head, and he kind of reflects back to me and says, "Oh, that makes me think what might be going on spiritually in the things that I bring him." And last time I went to see him, there was one particular situation that I was struggling with a little bit, and I was talking to him about my feelings and my wrestlings within this situation. And he said to me, "Actually, even in this wrestling, you've actually articulated to me that you have seen God's grace at work in this situation." And when I look back at my notes over all your previous meetings with me, that word grace is a word that comes up again and again. And so my homework, as it were, from my spiritual director was to be specifically on the lookout for signs of God's grace as I went about my day-to-day life. Now, I just want to pause at that moment and just explain what I mean by the word grace, because it's a word we use quite a lot in church circles, and sometimes it's not quite used quite as precisely as we might like, because actually grace does mean something specific. Grace doesn't just mean Jesus loves you. I mean, Jesus does love you, that is something, but grace is quite specific. Grace is about an unmerited gift, favour or forgiveness that we receive from God. It's about the fact we don't deserve something, but God gives it to us anyway. I was taught grace, GRACE, stands for God's riches at Christ's expense. So the main thing to hold on to with grace is understanding that this is about God giving us something that we don't deserve, that we haven't earned. God just gives it to us. So remember that as I move on, because I'm about to do a little bit of a first world problems thing. So imagine the world's tiniest little violin playing for me right now, because I'm going to talk about my holiday that I've just come back from. And it's very first world problems, isn't it, to complain about your holiday. I did have a lovely time. There were lots of really great family memories that we made on our holiday. So don't hear me just moaning about my holiday. However, we went to stay in Tivoli, just outside Rome, and it was in the middle of a heat wave. So it didn't drop below 35 degrees for most of the time that we were there. And I'm not great with the heat, neither are my children. So it was quite hard at times just dealing with the heat. And so whilst we did have some lovely food and some lovely times out and lots of fantastic stuff happened on holiday, there were some times when I'm ashamed to say I got a little bit grumpy and I found things a little bit hard. And in those moments, I had the words of my spiritual director in my head, actually, where is the grace in this? And there were a couple of incidents that I can actually really point to actually seeing something that reminded me of God's grace when I was looking for it. So the first time I was really aware of it was actually on I suppose it was technically day two, but it was still on the way there. So we flew over um, to Rome Airport. We had a hotel um, overnight, and then we got the train through Rome to Tivoli, and we arrived in Tivoli about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the heat was kind of at its worst at that point. Because we were in Italy, and I checked out all our phone contracts. I'd put my phone on airplane mode because I couldn't get 5G on my phone without paying a lot for it. Um, so I was trying to get us from the train station to our where we were staying, which is about a 10-15 minute walk. And we'd brought with us, we'd really maxed out our airport travel allowances because my children are real bookworms. One of them, she wouldn't have done this if I'd known about it in advance, had brought with her a hardback large print edition of the Iliad and the Odyssey, which we had carried in our luggage throughout the centre of Rome and were now dragging around Tivoli alongside the 7 books that my other daughter had brought, and all their notebooks, and a few books that Esther and I brought, and all our clothes, and all the British food we'd brought with us in case they didn't eat the Italian food, which they didn't. So we were dragging this stuff through the centre of Tivoli, which are in the beating sun. It was 35 degrees. We were dragging 2 massive suitcases plus all our hand luggage. Everybody had at least 1 bag. 2 of us had these big suitcases with us. We're dragging them through the centre of Tivoli about 3 o'clock in the beating sun. And Tivoli is quite a traditional town, so all the shops shut at about 1 o'clock till about 6:30 in the afternoon, so everybody can kind of go to sleep, get out of the sun, and then come back out in the evening to run stuff. So we were walking around Tivoli trying to find our accommodation. And it got to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd been in the beating sun and it was just awful. I was miserable. I couldn't find the accommodation. We were dragging these suitcases everywhere and it was just grim. Um, and then it turns out when we were a couple of 100 meters away from the accommodation at this point, but we didn't know that because we couldn't find the accommodation. Um, and in the end, we were stood in this kind of town square, not a lot going on that I could see, but there was a church to one side of us, and we kind of stood there and just thought, what on earth are we doing? Where are we going? I don't know what to do. And then this woman appeared with a jug of water and brought 2 seats out, got seats out, got us to sit down, poured us endless jugs of water, and it's the most beautiful water. Tivoli has got these fresh water springs, which is why the Romans went there, which is why it's quite a big tourist attraction. So it was beautiful water. It was cold. It was from the ground, the best water I've ever tasted, irrespective of how I was feeling. But I think at that point, knowing it was someone, and I knew she was connected to the church because she had a T-shirt on, she had a logo, so I was pretty sure it was someone connected with the church. They were running some kind of youth group or something. I think there were some kids running around with water pistols shortly afterwards. But that moment of actually, I'm tired, I'm sweaty, I'm fed up, I'm miserable. I've made a bit of a Horlicks of trying to get us to our house. I'm thoroughly ungrateful for the fact we're in this beautiful town right now. I did nothing to earn this beautiful cup of water and this sit down, and there was nothing I could give the woman that appeared with it. She didn't really speak English. We didn't really speak Italian, but all I could say was grazie, 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 which is about the extent of my Italian. But that was a sign of God's grace in the beating sun, where I'd messed up, we hadn't travelled properly, we'd got confused, no reason. We deserved that water, and this lady came and gave us water and somewhere to sit. That for me really encapsulates God's grace. And in that moment when I was at my most miserable on our holiday, God was there, and in his grace he provided water and somewhere to sit down, and we very soon afterwards found our accommodation. So that was one instance of grace that I spotted. Another one was also linked towards traipsing around Tivoli in the heat. It was very hot, as I keep saying, and Tivoli is quite steep. It's built on lots of hills, and one of the issues we had was we'd messed up the timing with arriving. Everything was shut, so we got there. We finally got to the accommodation a little bit after 4. But Italians, it turns out, don't really use milk or anything. So there was coffee and coffee making facilities there. But Esther's a tea drinker. I'd have milk in my coffee. There was no coffee or anything, and no food to eat for the evening meal. Which, no one was up for going out for a meal after that journey. So we had to kind of take a moment to cool down, drop our stuff off, and then Esther and I had to go out and find somewhere that would sell some milk and sell us something that we could eat for tea. So again, I'm still quite miserable, despite having had some beautiful water that God had graciously provided through his church in Tivoli. We were traipsing around trying to find somewhere to sell all that stuff. And again, thinking about God's grace, I spotted a little picture in a plaque over one of the houses in Tivoli, and there was a little image on it, and I kind of recognised the image because I think it's on one of the vestments that I wear when I preside at communion. Those of you that know me know I don't really like vestments. Do wear them because I know other people do, but I don't pay that much attention to them. I knew it was. I couldn't tell you what vestment it's on, or it might even be one of the. I forget the words. Pal, corporal, something we put on the communion cup to stop the bats pooing in it. I can't remember where, but it was a symbol, and I recognised it from something that I wear or use when we do communion. I couldn't remember what. So I knew there was a religious significance for it. So in my kind of looking for grace thing, I quickly snapped a picture of it. And then when I got back, I could connect to the Wi-Fi, and I kind of got a translation of it. And it was a little plaque kind of memorialising the fact that St Leonard of Port Maurice had preached in that house, which I didn't know who St Leonard of Port Maurice was or anything like that, but with a bit of Googling, it turns out he was kind of like the Catholic John Wesley. So he was a kind of an itinerant preacher that preached a very passionate, almost evangelical, I suppose, but in a Catholic kind of way, gospel message. So again, I think that was also when I was on the lookout for grace, and actually there was some grace there, and actually God taking my attention to the fact that actually someone had been there before me, and the gospel was there and was preached there very close to where I was, and his gospel was alive, and his gospel was real, and his gospel was where I was struggling. And then the final example of grace I want to give you is from a couple of days later. We'd kind of stirred ourselves. We were just starting to get into Italian life. We decided we were going to brave Rome. So we went into Rome for the day. The weather forecast told us it was going to be the coolest day of our stay, and maybe it was, but it didn't feel like it. Maybe because we were in Rome and it was all quite sweaty and everybody was packed together. But that was the day we went to go and see the Colosseum and the Forum, and also saw the prison where St Peter and St Paul were imprisoned. I'm not going to say anything about that now, but I did pop some photos up on our Facebook page if you want to have a look at them. But right at the end of the day, we'd kind of got to this point where we were very hot, we were very sweaty, we were very fed up, our feet were hurting, we'd been traipsing around. And Megala's like, I want to have one last look at the Colosseum from the outside. So we thought, okay, we'll go back to the metro, which we couldn't understand or work. we'll go back, but we'll go back past the Colosseum to have one final look at the Colosseum. And in that final kind of sweep of the Colosseum, I spotted a plaque on the wall of the Colosseum, which again, I couldn't find out about until I got home. But when I got home and translated it on the phone, it turns out that that plaque was saying words to the effect of, yes, we know the Colosseum was barbaric. We know it was dedicated to pagan gods. We know that people were killed and it was brutal, but it was sanctified by the blood of the martyrs that died there. And then it listed several popes that had prayed over it and rebuilt it and sanctified it and blessed it and whatever. And actually, I thought there was something beautiful in there in terms of looking for grace, that actually you have this beautiful ancient building that survived over 2,000 years, but it's barbaric and just evil in terms of what it was about and what it was for. But it's been turned into this thing that actually does point to God, and it does point to the martyrs, and actually how the martyrs were willing to die for their faith because they thought it was worth dying for. So I think there's grace there, and this evil thing is turned into something that actually does glorify God. And that kind of links into Bible passage that I kind of want to bring to you today. It comes from Acts. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. And he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. For from one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far away from any of us." I do wonder if Paul was in a similar mood to the mood I was in Tivoli in our reading, as I was in the square, all hot and bothered and fed up. Verse 16 of Acts chapter 17 gives us kind of the opening context. And we're told, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. It doesn't tell us what the weather was like, but in my head, it was hot because Athens is always hot. We're told that Paul was waiting for the others. He's been dropped off in Athens and he's kicking his heels, probably irritated because he wants to move on to the next thing. And he's wandering around Athens, spotting all these idols and being greatly distressed, as the actual translation puts it, irritated and hacked off. Maybe would be how I would describe it, thinking back to that hot, sweaty, fed up feeling that I had in Italy. And what I think is wonderful about this passage is that you have Paul in this place. He's greatly distressed by all these idols. He's around the pagan temples, the heathen temples. We can hear he's having an argument with Jews and non-Jews, and he's getting abuse, and he's just fed up, and it just seems like the most awful place in the world. But in this most awful, heathen, idolatrous place, he sees this altar to the unknown God. And rather than thinking, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, it's like, aha, this is grace. This shows that even amongst all these pagan, all these evil gods, all these false gods, there's an altar to an unknown God, which actually that's my in. That unknown God can be the God that I know, that I am going to share with these people. I'm going to explain to them who God is by using this altar that they, or rather their ancestors, have produced. It's part of their culture. They've set up an altar to an unknown God because they don't want to miss out any gods by mistake. So I'm going to tell them about the real God. And I think this is Paul doing what my spiritual director has told me to do. This is Paul spotting grace in the places where things are struggling, things are irritated, things are wrong, but there is grace there. And it's in spotting that grace that he's able to respond, and he's able to share the gospel, and there will be Christian converts in Athens. And that's kind of the thought I want to almost leave us on, because actually the whole point of this kind of rambling that you're getting from me now is that actually grace is everywhere. The gospel that Jesus died on the cross, that we can be in relationship with God, is around us. It's not some obscure theological idea that you find in textbooks. It is life. It is in the day-to-day God's riches at Christ's expense. Grace is about actually what Jesus did on the cross allows us to enjoy those unmerited gifts, that unmerited forgiveness that God lavishes upon us. So actually, if the gospel is true, which it is, then we should see grace all around us. So my challenge for you is the challenge that my spiritual director set me. And that's as you go about your life this week. And I'm not just talking about when you're in church or when you're reading the Bibles. As you live your life, where is the grace? Where is that unmerited gift to be seen? And are we living lives that reflect the unmerited gift? Where are the signs that God is with us and God is showering us with gifts that we don't deserve? Where do we spot those in our lives, and how do we live them in our lives? Where's the forgiveness, the grace that we give to others to not pick them up on something? We're going to give them that unmerited forgiveness by not going off on one about that mistake they have made. Where's the grace that we're going to give ourselves not to beat ourselves up about that thing that we got wrong? Where's the grace in our interactions? Where's the grace in the way we talk to those we love the most? Where's the grace in the way we think about ourselves? Where's the grace in those odd moments in the supermarket? Where's the grace in those moments in the bus queue? Where's the grace in the doctor's surgery? Because it's there. I kind of like to think that if you were to cut the earth in half from top to bottom and split it open like a kind of stick of Blackpool rock, it would say grace through the middle, because that's how God works. And God created the world, and God put his grace in the world. We just need eyes to see it. So that's the challenge for me and for you. Keep your eyes peeled for grace, because it's there, and when we spot it, it brings us closer to God, and it makes our faith something real rather than some abstract theological idea. Keep your eyes peeled for grace this week.
That Tiber's sun was hot and gold, a story that the ruins told. We found our grace in the cool stone, and in the gentle love we've known, a timeless and sweet memory. Amore.